around a year and a half ago, I first heard about this medium called Manwha, which is basically the South Korean equivalent of manga. And apart from the different country of origin, the layout is fairly similar, with the only real difference is most manhwa are vertical reads and also have full colour pages. Now we forward to a year and a half later. I have become very invested, binging somewhere between 75 and 100 reads. And today, I present to you the very best of manhwa, at least in my opinion. For the sake of making it easier, I'm just going to be calling everything manhwa. All Korean, Chinese, Taiwanese, webtoons, webcomics, basically anything that follows the general layout. I'll just simplify for now. So if you've never heard of this medium or don't know much, you should probably know there is a lot of shit to sift through, with 90% of reads being the same copy-paste brain rot story. But when you find that one that stands out, it fully makes up for it. So they usually fall into one of two lines: reincarnation, could be the same world or a new world, and then regression, which is going back in time to when you're younger. And the worlds are usually one of three. A system world, where there's usually towers or dungeons, and a system that tracks you like you're in a game. A good example of this is solo leveling. Next is a mirror world, which is usually focused on cultivation. A lot of Chinese manhwa fall into this category. And the final is just a normal fantasy world, like your T-Bates. And I would say that maybe 80 to 90% of all manhwa fall into these categories, some dipping into aspects from multiple. And the last thing to note is I usually don't read manhwa until they are over 50 chapters. And I also haven't read a few of the big ones like these on screen. So if you're confused why something isn't in my top 10, it's probably in here. So let's get into it. Before we go over my top 10, I'll quickly give you a few that were very close to making it and ones I would still definitely recommend. First, Damn Reincarnation. A fun reincarnation story where the MC was a side character of the hero's party, and is now reincarnated 300 years from now in the hero's bloodline. It's a classic fantasy world here and nothing too crazy, but a very good MC and also world makes it a very fun read. We also have The Infinite Mage, which is not actually a reincarnation or regression story, who would have guessed? But it follows the story of a poor kid who is both very interested in magic and also very talented, and how he navigates this world despite not being a noble. Duke Pendragon. A story where the MC is reincarnated and regresses into the body of a noble. A very weak noble. And this one got me. I'm a sucker for the stories where the MC starts with a really bad reputation and has to slowly change their image around. That and just the MC being a solid character makes for a very good read. The Art of Reincarnation. A story I originally didn't love too much, but picked it back up and was very invested. It's your typical reincarnation story with a really good MC and also a sick art style. It also has one of my favourite tropes, a strong family, with the MC being one of the youngest in the power struggle. Second from last, we have The Legend of the Northern Blade. If you're into manhwa, you definitely know about this one. A story where the MC's dad and sect gets betrayed and wiped out, and his journey to get revenge and bring the sect back to life. Incredible art, MC is absolutely fire. Didn't personally hit me so hard, but this is a lot of people's favourites, and I would still definitely recommend it. And my very last recommendation is going to be Return of the Blossoming Blade. A mirror world reincarnation manhwa, with the main draw being the MC. He is such a fucking dickhead, but very entertaining. For me, he's a little too overpowered and never really feels like it's a challenge for him, but it's a very solid read nonetheless. With those out of the way, it is time to get onto my favourites. Kicking off my list, we have The Revenge of the Baskerville Bloodhound. A fairly newer one, with it recently just finishing its first season. This is your standard regression story where the MC was previously a tool for the clan and gets used and disposed of. But this time around he is determined to get his revenge. Simple concept, but it does it really well. The art, the characters, the plot, it all just works for me. Maybe my favourite part is that he wasn't too OP in his last life or this one, so he is just slowly and steadily getting there. Also, you add in a power stealing ability and yeah, I'm sold. Later on in the story, he eventually affects everything enough where he doesn't even need to get his revenge anymore. And the end of the first season feels like a conclusion, but also just the start of a new chapter. So a really solid read, and I'm very excited to see where it goes in the future. I'm an Evil God. Where do I start with this one? I guess the premise. It's a story where our MC is reincarnated into the body of Ji Yan, who is being taken advantage of in this world, and is only used for his dual cultivation purposes, as they call it. This is the classic Chinese cultivation world where the MC also has a system, one of my favourite types of concepts. And it shows his journey from being an absolute nobody all the way up the ranks. Now, first, I have to say that this has the biggest ups and downs from any on this list. The start is quite interesting, but it quickly falls off and I even dropped this one. You see, the system allows him to transmigrate to other small worlds to gain strength and other things like that. And some of them are good, but a lot of them are very boring. In the first 150 chapters, it felt like maybe 40% of it was filler content. The next issue is translations, very inconsistent. It is so incredibly hard to follow this one. And then you add in text walls on text walls, and yeah, a lot of the time I am a bit lost. Now, with all of this, why is it in my top 10? I even dropped this one for like 3 months. Well, I picked it back up and it is getting good. Firstly, I'm not up to date. I'm currently reading this one, so maybe about 350 chapters out of about 450. And the art. Holy fuck. This is probably my favorite art in the medium. His progression of strength is also nice and steady. It feels like the system isn't too overpowered, and he is still very, very far away from being the peak of this world. The MC is also pretty decent. Isn't too evil like the name suggests, but he is a very fun character to follow, and the side character and villains are all pretty interesting as well. The translation is a lot better now, and the walls of text are still there, but it's okay. I think if I had a full guide on how to watch this one, aka minor world summaries so I could skip some of the ones I wasn't interested in, and also some other info I could keep on my second monitor, I would love this even more. But overall, it has some very high highs and low lows, but I can still appreciate how fun this read is. Here it is, the big one. Solo Leveling, probably the biggest manhwa out there. Actually, not probably, definitely. It has a very generic plot where the weakest MC gets reawakened and follows his journey to become the very strongest. However, it's just done really well. Its action, growth, MC, they're all very good. And it features some of maybe my favourite moments in manhwa history. That Thomas Andre fight, holy shit, it was peak. Also, the fact that most enemies he beat he could put into his own party of shadows was also very cool. But most of the joy came from the action, and also his growth as he rose faster and faster. However, I think it ultimately suffered because of this. Something I've come to hate in all mediums is when the character is overpowered and they also introduce new overpowered enemies out of nowhere. I know in the story it makes sense, but I didn't like it. For example, I also wasn't a fan of how they introduced the ants in Hunter x Hunter. It felt so out of nowhere and they were incredibly overpowered. And this one felt kinda similar to me. Also, at some point they sent him back in the past and I stopped reading. I didn't make it to the end of this one, but I think I got everything I wanted from it. Only about 180 chapters is all I needed. A very solid manhwa, definitely a recommend for newer fans. Nanomachine. If you've happened to dabble in manhwa before, you've definitely heard of this one. It's a classic mirror world where our MC is the illegitimate child of the demonic lord. The thing I like least about this show is the title. No, not the actual title, but as a child on the verge of death, our MC gets saved by someone in the future, and they give him something known as the Nanomachine, which gives him all sorts of OP abilities, like regen, being able to memorize and instantly copy moves, and a lot more. I don't like this at all, it just feels like he's cheating. Minus this setback, this show would be well into my top 5. The MC is very merciless when he needs, the side characters are also really unique, but the best part is the progression. He joins the school as a very weak character, and rises up quickly through the ranks to the top, gathering supporters as he goes. Eventually, major spoilers, but he kills his dad to become the demonic lord, and also becomes one of the strongest in the entire world. Now, this story does it well for me, as there is still a lot of direction for this one to go. From the start, we really only focused on the demonic faction. We still knew of the existence of the other factions, but just now we're starting to learn about them. At least that was when I last got up to date. I don't know where we are now. I really like this one. If I could just forget about all this cheating, both in the nanomachine and also actual cheating. Yeah, this whole part was kind of odd, but sure. All up, over 200 chapters now and a very solid read though. Devil Butler. It follows the story of a former demon emperor as he is betrayed and killed and reincarnated as a steward for a small weak family in the lower realm. Initially I wasn't a fan of this one, but it happened to really grow on me. The MC being the main topic of discussion, he is an absolute fucker. I mean, he was a demon emperor after all. He's easily the best and worst thing about this manhwa, as he is insanely cold, calculated, and confident. It follows his progression as he regains strength and becomes a major figure again. And progression is nice and slow. It's actually very entertaining to watch. He's the exact same fucker at every level of strength though, and it's very interesting to see how he interacts with every situation in front of him. I really love him and hate him at the same time. The story is very long, like 550 chapters. Again, I'm not fully up to date, but I think it peaked for me from around 30 chapters to about 400-ish chapters in. Now it's a little less interesting to me, and I'm not really a fan of the world as it's really hard to keep a track of where things are happening. Plus then you add in like multiple realms as well, and yeah, I don't know. But honestly a great read. If you stick through the start for about 40 chapters and aren't hooked though, I would give it up. Pick Me Up Infinite Gacha. Now, why wouldn't I like this one? It's a gacha game. On a reel though, I was almost going to drop this one about 20 chapters in. I didn't like the start very much and everything just felt way too fast paced. But it really came to grow on me. Basically, our MC is a gacha game player. I know, very relatable. But he is then dropped into the exact same game he was playing and realized all the characters he had on his account were actually real people. And now he has a person whose account he is a character for. The best part about this manhwa is two things. First, the characters, especially the MC. This guy is insanely cool. He realizes immediately he needs to fight to survive and gets straight to training. And he is what I would call a natural born leader. The second is the world. It becomes like a city maker, like a Clash of Clans. They get new facilities, new levels, and summon new people. It's really fun watching the city progress. The characters can also get sacrificed into other people, so there is a reason for new summoned characters to actually try. And I haven't even mentioned the art yet. Holy shit, it is absolutely insane. Now, the thing I don't like the most is characters are sent on missions on different floors of the tower. And every single main mission so far has been extreme diffed. Like, I'm talking Luffy Kaido extreme diff. It's kind of getting old at this point, watching them clutch up every single time from the most insane scenario. It's very overdone. Again, I'm not fully up to date this one, but they have just unlocked the ability to travel to different worlds, and the MC is now going back to the world he was the account owner of. Seems very interesting to me, and I'm going to pick this one back up in a second. Login Miram. It's a typical system world where monsters invade, people are awakeners, he's an F rank, blah blah blah. However, the catch is he finds a capsule that takes him to a Miram world, and this is where things get good. So he can travel between worlds, but the Miram world is a lot more interesting, and the author knows this, so the majority of the time is spent there. He also has a system in this Miram world, and he is the third son of a major house, who has an absolutely terrible reputation. Like I said earlier, I love these ones, where the MC has to slowly work to improve his image and also his strength. This manhwa actually perfected it for me. The MC is also very funny. He's a fucker. He feels the most like an actual human, not just an unrealistic coldest character ever, you know? If he can't win, he cheats and begs. If he can win, he will insult and make fun of them as much as possible. The progression is the best part for me though. Watching him work both to restore his image and also become a lot stronger in the process, which he definitely does. The system also tracks everything, so it's very easy to know how far along he is in his cultivation base. As a lot of Miram manhwa, especially Chinese ones, you need 3 different PhDs to figure out what the fuck is going on. This is a real page I had open from when I read a certain manhwa. Keeping in mind it also had inconsistent translations as well, so I didn't know what the fuck was happening. However, not too much for me to say on this one, other than it's a really enjoyable read and the MC makes it really fun. The Horizon. A story of a young boy and girl travelling through a war-torn world in which they encounter all sorts of strange people along the way. I said boy and girl because the characters' names are never revealed. It's a very dark story, which doesn't hold back from showing or telling you anything. It addresses dark topics like death and brutality with one simple, beautiful message. Keep moving forward. You see, they address this in a literal sense. Every bad encounter, where their hope seems to be very slim, they get back on the road and keep walking, as the only way to know if hope exists is to keep moving forward. This is a message that really resonated with me, and I think everyone should read this manhwa. It's only a short one with about 21 chapters. Oh, and it's actually complete. One of my favourite encounters in the story is when a boy and girl are saved by a man in a suit, who is a very interesting character. He kills every single person that comes into his city holding a gun, looking to do harm. Now, he doesn't actually know if they're bad people or they're just trying to protect themselves, but he doesn't care. He kills everyone with a gun. The kids get help from him and are eventually leaving and ask him to come with them. But he's a hypocrite. He knows it's not possible to keep moving forward. He believes the road will always end. And he meets his end, taking down many people with him, and the boy and the girl resume their journey down the road. Do they know where they're going? No. Does it really matter? Not really. This manhwa also tackles themes of love in the latter half, which I was a little confused by, and it didn't resonate as much with me. But it didn't take much off the impact of the other messages. In just 21 chapters, it manages to do something most manhwa, or any story for that fact, will ever come close to. A takeaway. Something that will actually stick with me for a long time. And I think that in itself is beautiful. L-Seed. It's a story about cat lover Jiwoo, our main character who possesses lightning fast speed, which he's been hiding from the world believing himself to be weird. One day he saves a cat, a very fat cat, which happens to be top tier awakener on the run named Kaden. Now, I was very hesitant to touch this manhwa, as the concept sounds kinda dumb, and all I saw in it were people just raving on about how pretty these characters were. I thought it was a read I definitely wasn't gonna enjoy. However, I couldn't have been more wrong. In manhwa, a lot of the characters are just filler. The MC is probably well thought out, but everyone else they don't really care about. In L-Seed, that is not the case. Everyone feels like a real person, for the most part. Jiwoo, our main character, is very kind-hearted but also stands on business when he needs to. Also, the main group of characters, every single one is well planned out and really unique. I love seeing every single interaction they have, and they're probably the best main cast in a manhwa I've read. Jiwoo, after saving Kaden, gets taught by him, and his progression is nice and steady, not too overpowered but also a very strong character. And the world is a super cool one. Most people are normal, but there's also a secret world of awakeners, all having powers making for some very cool fights. Which I haven't even mentioned yet, but after characters, it might be the best part. Also, the awakeners are ranked. The top 100, the top 10, such a cool concept to me. However, the top 10 almost never fight. I mean, it doesn't really make sense for them, as they're probably going to be injured and get targeted after, with the sole exception of Kaden, who rose through the ranks and called out every single top 10 to a fight, which they never accepted. This guy just wants the smoke. Now, earlier I said I liked the characters, mostly. The villains seem a little bit too villainy sometimes, but overall this is a must fucking read. So entertaining, and I cannot recommend it enough. Especially if you're tired of the same regression reincarnation story over and over again. And sitting on my throne for the number one of all time is the GOAT, T-Bait. The Beginning After the End is a story following the life of King Gray, who dies and is reincarnated in a new world as Arthur Lewin. This world is your typical fantasy world with magic and monsters, and with King Gray retaining his memories from the past life, he is able to progress his strength very early on. Now, what carries this story for me is the characters, specifically Arthur. He's probably my favourite MC of all time, as this guy is the actual definition of cold. The world is also well fleshed out. The best way I could describe it is Mushoku Tensei, but with an actually good MC. I did read this one very early on in my manhwa journey, so could be a little biased, but I still think it was the perfect isekai. The growth of Arthur was also very entertaining. He doesn't feel too OP, up until a point where I think the story peaks and then subsequently declines, which is around chapter 139, which features my favourite entrance of all time. Holy shit, it is maybe my favorite moment in Manwha history. They had been building up for what felt like the whole story for Arthur to kill this guy, and it absolutely paid off. The narration, the walk, everything. I love this scene. This was the absolute peak of the show. It then suffered some of the same issues as Solo Leveling for me. He became too strong, and then they had to have him fight gods or something. I preferred it all before then. Also, it's just off hiatus after a very long time, and they have got a new artist, and yeah, I don't know, I'm probably not going to pick this one back up. However, I have heard very good things about the novel, so I'm definitely going to have to give that a read. Overall though, this manhwa, or webcomic, or whatever you call it, was the one that got me into the medium properly. Without it, I wouldn't be a manhwa fan. So since I've read it, it's been my number one of all time. So that's all we have for today. I know I don't have the greatest taste of all time, but this is just my personal list of favourites. And I think manhwa as a medium is only on the rise. I believe and also hope it becomes a lot bigger in the future, as there is a lot of good stories in here. I've linked my full manhwa list below, so if you've got any recommendations I haven't read, please drop them. I've definitely still got a lot I want to read. But that is all I've got for now. I will say goodbye. Goodbye for now.